My name is Morgan Delaney. At 36, I've learned that loyalty in the corporate world is as fragile as the promises made by executives who've never written a line of code. I built Artivix solutions from the ground up, their client portal, security protocols, everything. When they decided to replace me with a fresh-faced intern just days before my bonus was due, they had no idea what they'd set in motion. I still remember the day I joined Artivix in Minneapolis. It was a scrappy startup with 15 people crammed into an office that smelled perpetually of cheap coffee and ambition. Judith Parmer, our CEO then, had this vision of creating an integrated platform that would revolutionize how insurance and financial companies manage their client relationships. She needed someone who could architect it from scratch. Morgan, she told me after my third interview, I need someone who can build something that never goes down, that clients can trust with their most sensitive data, and that will scale as we grow. I think that's you. I was 28 then, hungry to prove myself. The salary wasn't spectacular, but Judith offered something more valuable: equity and a special performance bonus. If I could build a system with 99.98% uptime over 18 months, I'd receive a $500,000 bonus. It wasn't just about the money, it was recognition of the impossible task she was asking me to accomplish. I named the system Client Link. It wasn't just a portal, it was an ecosystem that integrated every service Artivix offered, providing real-time data to clients while maintaining the highest security standards in the industry. I lived and breathed that system. 3A. Emergency patches, canceling vacations to address potential vulnerabilities, spending holidays fine-tuning database performance, all while building and leading a team that shared my dedication. By month 16, we'd achieved 99.9989% uptime. Client Link became the reason Artivix grew from 15 employees to over 200. It was why major insurance companies and financial institutions trusted us with their data. And Judith, true to her word, confirmed my bonus would be paid at the 18-month mark, exactly 8 weeks from that day. The first sign of trouble came when Judith announced her retirement. Blake Torrance, the new CEO, arrived with sharp suits and sharper cost-cutting measures. He spoke constantly about streamlining operations and preparing for IPO readiness. I noticed my meeting invitations dwindling. Strategic discussions that once required my input now happened behind closed doors. Then came Melinda Cartwright, the new COO. I overheard her talking to Blake one evening when they thought the office was empty. I'd stayed late fixing a minor bug that was bothering me. Morgan's work is solid, but she's too expensive and too entrenched, she said. We need someone more malleable, someone who won't question the changes we need to make before the IPO. Blake's response chilled me. Let's wait until after the quarterly numbers are announced. We'll need to handle this delicately. I should have seen it coming, but I was too focused on maintaining Client Link's perfect record. Besides, surely they wouldn't jeopardize the system that was the backbone of their entire operation. The system that their biggest clients relied on daily. It was a Tuesday morning when my key card didn't work. Security escorted me to a conference room where Blake, Melinda, and a woman from HR waited with practiced sympathetic expressions. Morgan, thank you for coming in. Blake began as if I had a choice. Artivix is moving in a new direction. The Client Link system has stabilized, and we no longer need such a senior-level team maintaining it. Melinda jumped in, her voice artificially gentle. As part of our restructuring, we're consolidating departments and streamlining our engineering leadership. You're firing me, I asked, unable to process what was happening. 1 week before my performance bonus vests, Blake shifted uncomfortably. Your contribution has been valuable, but the company's needs have changed. We're offering 2 months severance, contingent upon signing this NDA. The HR woman slid a document across the table. I didn't touch it. Who's taking over Client Link? I asked, already suspecting the answer. We've been impressed with Tyler Chen's contributions, Melinda said, referring to the 22-year-old intern we'd hired from Harvard 3 months ago. He's shown remarkable aptitude and fresh perspective. I almost laughed. Tyler was bright. Sure, but he'd been working on the most superficial aspects of the system. He had no concept of the complex security protocols I'd built, the redundancies, the fail-safes. You're replacing me with an intern who doesn't know the first thing about the system architecture. Tyler will be supported by the existing team, Blake said dismissively. We've determined this is the best path forward for Artivix. I signed their papers, not because I agreed, but because I knew arguing wouldn't change their minds. As I packed my personal items, supervised by security like a criminal, I thought about Client Link's fail-safe system. When I built Client Link, I'd incorporated a protection mechanism completely documented in the technical specifications, but buried in hundreds of pages that I knew no one ever read. If certain types of changes were detected without proper authentication, the system would automatically switch to read-only mode to protect client data from corruption. It was a legitimate security feature, designed to prevent catastrophic data breaches or unauthorized changes. The authentication required a key that only 3 people had: myself, Judith, and our original head of security who had left years ago. Blake and Melinda had pushed Judith out so completely that I doubted they'd even consulted her about the system. I didn't sabotage anything. I simply didn't volunteer information that was already in the documentation they should have reviewed. And when I got home that night, I used my development environment, which they'd forgotten to deactivate, to run a standard integrity check. The system, detecting changes being made by unauthorized personnel. Tyler did exactly what it was programmed to do. It locked down to protect client data. For 9 days, nothing happened. I assumed they'd figured it out, or maybe the system hadn't locked down after all. I focused on updating my resume and calling contacts. Then my phone rang a number I didn't recognize. Morgan, it's David from IT. David was one of the few team members I trusted implicitly. You won't believe what's happening here. According to David, Tyler had been making changes to the client data protocols, exactly the kind of modifications that would trigger the failsafe. But the system hadn't immediately locked down because the changes were minor. It was only when they pushed a major update that the system froze. They're doing a demo for Global Insure today, David said, naming our largest client. A full presentation of the new features Tyler implemented. Blake and Melinda are leading it. Global Insure wasn't just any client. They were a multinational insurance corporation whose contract represented almost 40% of Artivix's revenue. They were also notoriously demanding about system reliability and had a clause allowing them to terminate their contract if there were significant service disruptions. I felt a twinge of sympathy for Tyler. The kid was probably terrified, thrown into the deep end by executives who valued cost-cutting over competence. But my sympathy had limits, especially when my phone dinged with an email later that afternoon. From Carson, James, Artivix. Com. Subject: Urgent System Consultation. Morgan. We're experiencing issues with Client Link during a critical client presentation. We'll pay your standard daily rate plus a premium for immediate assistance. Please call me as soon as possible. James Carson, CIO. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. Morgan, it's Melinda Cartwright. I almost declined the call, but curiosity won out. This is Morgan. We need your help. Her voice had lost all its corporate polish. The system is completely locked in read-only mode. We can't update any client data, and Global Insure is threatening to walk. That sounds serious, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Blake is authorized to offer you a consulting fee of $10,000 to fix this immediately. I almost laughed. They denied me a $500 bonus I'd earned, and now they thought $10,000 would bring me running. Everything you need is in the documentation, I said. Maybe you should have read it. Morgan, please. This could cost us everything. It already cost me everything, I replied. My job, my team, my bonus. Give the documentation to Tyler. I'm sure he'll figure it out. Given his remarkable aptitude and fresh perspective, I hung up and blocked her number. The next day, I received frantic messages from James, Blake, and even board members. I responded to none of them. 3 days later, an emergency board meeting was called. Through my industry contacts, I learned that Global Insure had not only walked away from the presentation, but had given Artivix 30 days to resolve the system issues or they would terminate their contract. Meanwhile, I wasn't sitting idle. I'd built Client Link from nothing. I could do it again. But better. I took my vested equity worth about $180,000 combined it with my savings, and incorporated Delaney TechWorks, my vision client management systems that were transparent, self-maintaining, and designed with integrity from the ground up. I reached out to former colleagues who had either left Artivix or been restructured out. Within weeks, I had a small but formidable team working on a new platform that incorporated everything I'd learned from building Client Link, without the corporate politics. 2 months after my departure from Artivix, I received a LinkedIn message from Global Insure's CTO, requesting a meeting. They'd heard through the grapevine that I was building something new. 2 weeks later, Global Insure became Delaney TechWorks' first major client. The domino effect was swift. Another former Artivix client signed with us the following month. Then another. Each time, the story was similar frustration with Client Link's ongoing issues, lack of transparency from Artivix leadership, and dissatisfaction with the inexperienced team now handling their sensitive data. 6 months after my unceremonious dismissal, Artivix's planned IPO was indefinitely postponed. Their stock value in private markets plummeted. Through industry channels, I heard that Melinda had been asked to resign. Blake announced he was pursuing other opportunities, corporate speak, for being forced out. Judith Palmer called me a year after I started Delaney TechWorks. "I always knew you were smart," she said. "But I underestimated just how smart. They never consulted me about the failsafe. Never even asked if there might be something they should know about the system." "Would you have told them?" I asked. "Probably not," she admitted. "They didn't deserve to know after what they did to you. But I'm curious, did you ever consider going back to fix it when they called?" "Not for a second," I replied. "Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned." 2 years after being escorted out of Artivix, I appeared on the cover of TechGuard magazine. The headline read, "Fired for saving the system, now her platform runs the industry." The article detailed how Delaney TechWorks had become the go-to solution for insurance and financial companies seeking reliable client management systems. Our valuation had just hit $160 million, more than 4 times the bonus I'd been denied. The article didn't mention that Artivix had finally managed to fix Client Link after hiring 3 senior engineers and bringing Judith back as a consultant. By then, it was too late. They'd lost most of their major clients and were a shell of their former selves. I keep a framed copy of that magazine cover in my office as a reminder, sometimes the best revenge isn't crashing a system, it's building a better one. They thought they could replace me with an intern to save money. Instead, they learned an expensive lesson about the true cost of technical debt, broken promises, and undervaluing the people who build the foundations their business stands on. I didn't crash their client portal out of spite. I simply allowed their own ignorance to catch up with them. And when it did, I was already building something better, something they couldn't touch. That $500,000 bonus. It would have been the bargain of the century compared to what their short-sightedness ultimately cost them. But I'm not complaining. Some lessons are worth more than money for them. And for me, my name is Morgan Delaney. And this is how I turned betrayal into the best business decision of my life. The morning Blake and Melinda called me into that conference room, I knew my time at Artivix was over. What I didn't know was that it was just the beginning of something much bigger than a client portal or a $500,000 bonus. I walked out of Artivix carrying only a small box of personal items, but I left with something far more valuable: knowledge that couldn't be packaged in documentation or transferred to an eager 22-year-old intern. I understood not just how Client Link worked, but why it worked. The following weeks were a strange mixture of anger, relief, and anticipation. I allowed myself 3 days to process what had happened, to feel the full weight of the betrayal by a company I'd helped build. On the 4th day, I started coding. My apartment's 2nd bedroom became command central for what would eventually become Delaney TechWorks. I covered the walls with whiteboards, mapping out a system architecture that would address all the limitations I'd wanted to fix in Client Link, but never had the freedom to implement. 2 weeks in, I received a text from Rachel, who had been my lead security engineer at Ardivix. They're still trying to fix it. Tyler keeps making it worse. Blake is losing his mind. I didn't respond, but I smiled. I hadn't designed Client Link's failsafe to be difficult to fix, just impossible to fix without understanding the system's core architecture. The solution was literally spelled out in the technical documentation, but it required someone to read it thoroughly and understand the system's philosophy. Rachel texted again an hour later. They fired Tyler. Poor kid was set up to fail. That I hadn't anticipated. Tyler was just a pawn in their game, bright, eager, but completely unprepared for the responsibility they'd thrust upon him. I felt a pang of guilt, followed quickly by resolve. This wasn't about Tyler. It was about executives who thought technical expertise was interchangeable and disposable. 3 weeks after my dismissal, I incorporated Delaney TechWorks officially. The same day, I received an email from Judith Parmer. From Judith. Parmer email. Subject lunch Morgan. I heard what happened. Those fools. I'd like to buy you lunch and discuss your next steps, if you're willing. Judith. We met at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Judith looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen her, the burden of corporate leadership no longer weighing on her shoulders. They're panicking, she said after we ordered. Blake called me yesterday, asked if I knew anything about Client Link's emergency protocols. I played dumb. You didn't owe them anything, I replied. Neither did you. She studied me for a moment. What are you building now? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to my former CEO, but this was Judith, the woman who had believed in me when Client Link was just an idea. Something better, I said finally. A platform that learns from its users, adapts to their needs, and can't be compromised by inexperienced hands or corporate cost-cutting. Judith smiled. You always were thinking 3 steps ahead. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. When you're ready for investors, call this person. She manages my portfolio now, and she's very interested in backing former Ardivix talent. A month later, I hired my first employee, Rachel, who had finally had enough of the chaos at Ardivix. She brought with her not just her security expertise, but insights into exactly how badly they were handling the Client Link crisis. They brought in 3 different consulting firms, she told me as we set up her workstation. None of them could figure out why the system keeps reverting to read-only mode. They've even started building a replacement from scratch, but it'll take months. And Global Insure isn't willing to wait. I nodded, not revealing that I felt both vindicated and sad. Vindicated because their short-sightedness was proving costly. Sad because Client Link had been my creation. And watching it falter was like watching a child struggle. How's the team holding up? I asked. Rachel shrugged. Most of the original engineers have left. Morale is rock bottom. Melinda keeps sending these "we're all in this together" emails while Blake threatens everyone with termination if the system isn't fixed. By month 2, we had a working prototype of what would become Delaney Connect. It addressed every pain point I'd identified over my years at Ardivix, with a focus on reliability, transparency, and genuine client control over their data. I reached out to contacts at several mid-sized insurance companies' firms that weren't large enough to be Ardivix clients but had similar needs. 2 agreed to beta test our system. Their feedback was invaluable, and their enthusiasm confirmed what I already knew: there was room in the market for a better solution. Then came the call from Global Insure. Ms. Delaney. This is Howard Vance, CTO at Global Insure. I understand you're developing a new client management platform. My heart raced. That's correct, Mr. Vance. I'd like to see it. Our situation with Ardivix has become untenable. We arranged a meeting for the following week. I worked around the clock with Rachel and our 2 other team members to prepare a demo that would showcase not just what Delaney Connect could do now, but what it would become. The morning of the meeting, My phone buzzed with a news alert. Artivix announces indefinite delay of IPO plans amid technical challenges. The meeting with Howard Vance and his team went better than I could have hoped. They asked tough questions, probed our security protocols, and tested edge cases I hadn't considered. But the underlying message was clear: they were impressed. "Your system addresses every issue we've had with Artivix," Howard said as the meeting concluded. "How quickly can you scale to handle our volume?" It was a legitimate concern. Global Insure processed millions of transactions daily, far more than our current infrastructure could handle. "With proper funding, 3 months," I said honestly. "We'd need to expand our team and server capacity." Howard nodded. "Send me a proposal by the end of the week. Include what you'd need to make this happen on an accelerated timeline." That evening, I called Judith's investment contact. By the end of the week, we had secured enough funding to hire 10 more engineers and expand our server capacity tenfold. The proposal to Global Insure included a 6-week timeline and a guarantee of 99.99% uptime from day one. They signed the contract a week later. The news spread quickly through the industry. Artivix's stock, already suffering from the IPO delay, plummeted further. My phone began ringing with calls from other Artivix clients, all asking the same question: could Delaney Connect handle their needs too? 4 months after being fired, I moved Delaney TechWorks into a proper office space. Our team had grown to 25, including 8 former Artivix employees who brought with them institutional knowledge and client relationships that proved invaluable. I received an unexpected email on the day we moved into our new office. From Blake. "Torrance Artivix. Com. Subject a proposition. Morgan, I hope this finds you well. I've been following your success with interest and admiration. I'm reaching out to discuss a potential collaboration between Artivix and Delaney TechWorks. I believe our companies could benefit from combining strengths. Would you be available for a meeting next week? Regards, Blake Torrance, CEO, Artivix Solutions." I showed the email to Rachel, who laughed out loud. "Is he serious after everything they did?" I deleted the email without responding. Blake sent 3 more over the following weeks, each more desperate than the last. The final one acknowledged their mistake in letting me go and offered to acquire Delaney TechWorks for a substantial premium. I didn't respond to that one either. 6 months after Global Insure signed with us, Artivix announced a strategic restructuring. They laid off 40% of their staff, including Melinda Cartwright. Blake Torrance resigned the following week, citing personal reasons. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a sense that justice had been served. The employees who lost their jobs were collateral damage in a war they hadn't started, victims of leadership that valued short-term gains over long-term stability. When Delaney TechWorks celebrated its 1-year anniversary, we had grown to 70 employees and were serving 15 major clients, including 4 former Artivix cornerstone accounts. Our valuation had hit $75 million, and we were profitable, a rarity for a tech startup in its first year. The TechGuard cover story came a year later. After we secured Series B funding at a $160 million valuation, the reporter who interviewed me was particularly interested in the Artivix connection. "Do you consider what happened to Artivix to be revenge?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "Revenge implies intentional harm. What happened to Artivix was simply consequence, the natural result of prioritizing short-term financial gains over product integrity and team loyalty. They made decisions based on spreadsheets rather than understanding what actually made their product valuable." "And what was that?" she asked. "People," I replied. "Not just me, but every engineer who poured their expertise and care into building something reliable. You can't replace that with cheaper alternatives and expect the same results." The article didn't capture everything: how I'd insisted on profit sharing for all Delaney TechWorks employees, or how we'd implemented a transparent promotion track that rewarded both technical expertise and mentorship. It didn't mention our policy of reading all documentation out loud during team reviews to ensure nothing critical was buried or overlooked. These weren't just reactions to Ardivix's failures. They were the foundation of a company I'd always wanted to build, but couldn't until circumstances forced my hand. Judith Palmer joined our board of directors 18 months after we launched. During her first board meeting, she pulled me aside. "You know what the difference is between you and Blake?" she asked. "Besides basic technical competence," I replied with a smile. "You understand that a company's value isn't just in its code or its client list, it's in its people and the trust they've built." Blake never understood that, and it cost him everything. 3 years after being escorted out of Ardivix, I received an unexpected visitor at our office. Tyler Chen, the intern who had briefly been my replacement, stood awkwardly in our reception area. "I wanted to apologize," he said when I invited him into my office. "I had no idea what they were doing when they promoted me. I was just excited about the opportunity." "You have nothing to apologize for," I assured him. "They set you up to fail." Tyler had landed on his feet, working for a smaller tech firm where he was gaining the experience he should have had before being thrust into a senior role. He was still bright, still eager, but now tempered with the wisdom that comes from failure. "We're hiring junior developers," I told him. "If you're interested, send me your resume." He joined Delaney TechWorks the following month. 5 years after the day my keycard stopped working at Ardivix, our company's valuation exceeded $300 million. We'd expanded internationally, opening offices in London and Singapore. ClientLink had become a case study in business schools about the dangers of technical debt and short-sighted leadership. Ardivix still exists, but as a shadow of its former self. They eventually fixed the ClientLink issues and found a niche serving smaller clients who couldn't afford more sophisticated solutions. They never did go public. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Blake and Melinda had honored my bonus and kept me on. Would ClientLink have evolved into something as powerful as Delaney Connect? Would Ardivix have achieved its IPO dreams? It's impossible to know, but I suspect not. The culture that allowed them to discard a key architect to save $500,000 would have eventually manifested in other destructive ways. The failsafe wasn't just in ClientLink's code, it was in how they approached business itself. My office now has a small shelf dedicated to reminders of the journey. The original ClientLink architecture diagrams, the security badge they never asked me to return, a framed copy of that TechGuard cover, and a small plaque that reads, "Sometimes the best code is the code that protects itself." They thought they could replace me with an intern before my bonus cleared. What they didn't realize was that they weren't just losing an employee, they were creating their most formidable competitor. My name is Morgan Delaney, and I didn't just build a better system, I built a better company. Every company has its fail-safe mechanisms designed to prevent catastrophic failure. Some are written into code, others into contracts. The most important ones, though, are woven into relationships. When Blake and Melinda decided I was expendable, they didn't just break a financial agreement, they severed a connection that had been integral to Ardivix's success. After the TechGuard article came out, I received a handwritten note from Judith. "I always knew you were destined for more than being someone else's solution architect." She wrote, "Sometimes we need a push to find our true path. Yours just happened to be more of a shove." She was right. As much as I had loved building ClientLink, there had always been constraints, budgetary limitations, corporate politics, compromises that prioritized quarterly results over long-term stability. Delaney TechWorks was built without those constraints, guided by principles rather than profit margins. That's not to say we ignored financial realities. Our investors expected returns, and I was committed to providing them. But we did it by creating genuine value, not by cutting corners or sacrificing quality for quick gains. The industry took notice. At a major tech conference in our 3rd year, I was invited to give a keynote address on building resilient systems in volatile markets. Without mentioning Ardivix by name, I shared the lessons learned from ClientLink's development and subsequent issues. "The most expensive line of code is the one you don't write," I told the audience, by which I mean the documentation, the fail-safes, the integrity checks that seem unnecessary until they're desperately needed. The talk resonated with technical leaders who had witnessed similar situations, vital systems entrusted to inexperienced hands, institutional knowledge discarded to save costs, short-term decisions with long-term consequences. After the conference, a venture capitalist approached me with an intriguing proposition: a fund specifically designed to back companies founded by experienced engineers who had been pushed out of larger corporations. The Phoenix Fund, they called it, after the mythical bird that rises from ashes. I became an advisor to the fund, helping to identify promising candidates and providing mentorship. Over the next 2 years, the Phoenix Fund backed 17 startups founded by technical experts who had been sidelined or discarded by corporate cost-cutting. 14 of them became profitable. Meanwhile, Delaney TechWorks continued to grow. We expanded beyond insurance and financial services into healthcare and education industries, where data security and system reliability were paramount. By year 4, we employed over 200 people across 3 continents. One morning, I received an email that made me pause. From Melinda. Cartwright Innovation Partners, subject Coffee Morgan. It's been a long time. I've been following your success from afar and have to admit, I made a terrible mistake at Artivix. I'm working with startups now as an advisor, trying to help them avoid the pitfalls I fell into. I'd appreciate the chance to buy you coffee and apologize in person. Melinda. Unlike Blake's desperate attempts to salvage Artivix, Melinda's email seemed genuine. After considering it for a day, I agreed to meet. The Melinda who greeted me at a small cafe downtown was markedly different from the polished COO I'd known. She seemed humbler, more reflective. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened, she said after we'd exchanged awkward pleasantries. I got caught up in Blake's vision of a quick IPO and lost sight of what actually made Artivix valuable. Which was you, your team, the expertise you brought. She stirred her coffee absently. After everything fell apart, I did some soul-searching. I realized I'd been focusing on the wrong metrics, listening to the wrong voices. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. The irony is, if we'd just paid your bonus and kept you on, Artivix would probably be worth billions now. Instead, she trailed off. Instead, you learned an expensive lesson. I finished for her. Very expensive. She smiled ruefully. I'm trying to pass that lesson on to the startups I work with now. Technical debt isn't just about outdated code, it's about the knowledge gaps created when you lose key people. We talked for over an hour. Melinda had indeed reinvented herself as a startup advisor, with a particular focus on helping technical founders navigate growth without sacrificing product integrity. I found myself respecting her journey, even if I couldn't forget her role in my dismissal. As we were preparing to leave, she asked a question that caught me off guard. The fail-safe in client link, was it really documented, or did you add it knowing no one would find it? I smiled. It was documented. Page 342 of the Technical Specifications, Section 7.3.2, Emergency Data Protection Protocols. Every line of code, every trigger condition, all laid out in black and white. But you knew no one would read it. I suspected, I admitted. In 5 years at Artivix, I'd never seen an executive open the technical documentation. But that doesn't change the fact that it was there, exactly where it should have been. Melinda shook her head, a mixture of admiration and chagrin on her face. That's the difference between us, I suppose. You paid attention to the details everyone else ignored. After our meeting, I found myself reflecting on the journey from fired employee to successful founder. The $500,000 bonus that had seemed so significant at the time now felt almost trivial compared to what had followed. But its denial had been the catalyst for everything that came after. In our 6th year, Delaney TechWorks faced its first major crisis. A 0-day vulnerability was discovered in a third-party library we used for data encryption. The potential impact was severe. All client data could have been compromised. We had 48 hours before the vulnerability would be publicly disclosed. My executive team gathered in our conference room, faces grim. What are our options? I asked. Our CTO outlined 3 possibilities: a quick patch that might introduce other issues, a more thorough fix that would take longer than the disclosure timeline, or a temporary shutdown of all systems until a proper solution could be implemented. 6 years earlier, at Artivix, the decision would have been simple: the quick patch, to minimize disruption and protect quarterly numbers. But Delaney TechWorks operated on different principles. Shut it down, I said without hesitation. Contact every client personally, explain the situation, the risk, and our plan to address it. Be completely transparent. My CFO winced. That could cost us millions in downtime penalties. And trying to hide it could cost us everything, I countered. Our reputation is built on trust and transparency. This is when those values actually matter. We shut down all systems for 36 hours while our security team worked around the clock to implement a proper fix. As promised, we personally contacted every client. From the largest international corporation to the smallest regional firm. The response was remarkable. Not a single client terminated their contract. Several publicly praised our handling of the situation. One CEO told me, "This is why we chose Delaney TechWorks. You don't just talk about integrity, you demonstrate it when it costs you something." The incident became a defining moment for our company, culture proof that our values weren't just marketing slogans, but genuine operating principles. 7 years after starting Delaney TechWorks, I received an offer to acquire the company for $1.2 billion from a major tech conglomerate. The offer was generous, well above market value, and would have made me and my early employees incredibly wealthy. I brought it to our board, which now included Judith, 2 investor representatives, and 3 elected employee representatives, a governance structure I'd insisted on when we raised our Series C round. The board discussion was thorough and thoughtful. The financial case for accepting was compelling. But when I asked each board member to share their perspective, a common theme emerged: concern about what would happen to our culture, our clients, and our employees under new ownership. "I've seen too many acquisitions destroy what made the original company special," Judith said. "The acquiring company always promises autonomy, but it rarely lasts." Our employee representatives shared similar concerns. "People joined Delaney TechWorks because of what we stand for," one said. "If that changes, we'll lose our best talent." I declined the offer the next day. Instead, we raised a smaller round of funding to fuel continued growth on our own terms. 10 years after being escorted out of Artivix with a box of personal belongings, I stood on a different stage, ringing the opening bell as Delaney TechWorks went public. Our IPO valued the company at $2.8 billion, a valuation built on sustainable growth, client trust, and technical excellence. As I looked out at the trading floor, I couldn't help but think about how differently things might have turned out if Blake and Melinda had simply honored the commitment Judith had made to me. For want of a $500,000 bonus, they had lost a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. After the bell-ringing ceremony, a reporter asked me about Artivix, which had been acquired the previous year for a fraction of its former valuation. "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked. I thought about Tyler, now our Director of Client Solutions, about Rachel, our CTO, about the dozens of former Artivix employees who had found a home at Delaney TechWorks, about the clients who had followed us, trusting in our vision and values. "This was never about vindication," I said finally. "It was about building something that reflects a different set of priorities, where technical excellence matters, where commitments are honored, and where people are valued for their knowledge and expertise." "And the fail-safe that started it all?" she pressed. I smiled. "The best fail-safes are the ones you never have to use. But when you do need them, you're grateful they're there." That evening, I hosted a celebration for our entire company. As I looked around at the faces of people who had joined me on this journey, some from the very beginning, others along the way, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. My phone buzzed with a text from Judith. From 500K to 2.8B. Not a bad return on their mistake. I smiled and texted back, "The best revenge is building something better." And that's exactly what we did. Not out of spite or anger, but because sometimes being pushed off one path reveals another that was meant for you all along. My name is Morgan Delaney. They replaced me with an intern before my 500K bonus, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me.